The history of Twilight.
Dazzle us with the history, Matt.
Okay.
Jesus.
So
It's a porker.
This story starts, of course, in 1826.
Oh, gee, you're taking us all the fuck back.
We are in Western New York, and a popular activity in the area is called glass looking. And in this, a wealthy benefactor finances a small expedition. We go out looking for treasure in the hills of Western New York. And this is, of course, a grift. But one of the more prominent grifters of these treasure hunters at the time, a 20-year-old man who we're looking at on the screen, gets arrested in Bainbridge, New York, and is accused of being a disorderly person and a fraudster. But this was just the beginning of a long and storied career for this young man, Joseph Smith, who claims to have received his first vision from heavenly messengers at age 14. In Western New York, would go on to locate golden plates buried in the hills from which he transcribed and composed the Book of Mormon.
Why does this have to do with Mormonism?
The Book of Mormon, which of course tells the story of the early Israelites who left Jerusalem to move to America around the year 600 BC. And then Smith then took his followers. They left out to find a new Jerusalem somewhere in America, eventually ending up in Missouri, where Joseph Smith dies, and then his followers, under the leadership of Brigham Young, eventually immigrate to Utah. They settle permanently. They joyfully celebrate their polygamy. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is founded, blossoms today, has more than 17 million adherents, and it is into this church that, on Christmas Eve of 1973, Stephenie Morgan is born into a large Mormon family. And at the age of 21, she marries Christian Meyer and becomes known as the thing we all know her now as Stephenie Meyer.
Okay, wait, that's all you had to say was she was Mormon. Yeah, he was definitely 50 and she... Okay, I can say that. I can say it if I want.
Yeah, but you understand the reason I said it is funny?
Okay, no, that's amazing. Yes.
And there is a great article that I will link to in the description. I've always known this theory that Twilight is about the story of the founding of the Mormon Church. And I was always like, I don't see it. But I read this article that like really opened my eyes to it. Basically, this guy, John Granger, he's like, Carlisle Cullen is Joseph Smith. And this is about like a son of Joseph Smith having a romance with some girl who they then convert to Mormonism. And apparently,
and once you break the seal, that girl's no good. You got to seal her back up, or the virginity stuff just makes much more.
Sure. Well, I mean, I
always knew it was religious, but damn it.
It's the seal of freshness.
Oh, I say it's unfresh. If you seal that shit up, you need to let it breathe.
No, I've always known, like, obviously this is like a conservative Christian story, and like that's okay. That. It's okay to like conservative art. Often conservative art is very interesting, but I didn't know about the Mormon specifics.
I'm saying that adds a little bit of darkness to it for me, because I went through the whole like WWJD bracelet thing, and then the idea of a promise ring. I mean, there's always that like wave of we're going to be virgins till we get married shit that happens at some point during high school. So like, I know these teens.
Wait, is if we're going off of this sort of narrative, okay, I'm sticking with Matt's sort of timeline here with his ideology on this. If that is the case, does that mean that the vegetarian vampires, like vampires are Christians and then vegetarian vampires are Mormons?
You got it exactly right. Yes, that is exactly the case. And in this, yes, and the Volturi are the evil Catholic Church.
Yes, that makes sense.
And I don't know what the werewolves would be, because then there's a thing in
pagans.
In Mormonism, Native Americans are important to Mormonism because the idea is that they are the descendants of the ancient Israelites.
So like Jewish people are to
Twilight,
Christians.
there are actual Native Americans. So I don't know how that. Anyway, this author says the series ends when they bring up this South American indigenous vampire who represents like proof that vampires and humans can co-breed or whatever. And the guy says, like, this is like a Mormon fantasy that we will get proof that Native Americans are descended genetically from ancient Israelites. And that was the one that really kind of creeped me out. Bella here is like a modern American woman who realizes I can find happiness in the Mormon church. I can get married young, have a lot of hot sex, and live my happy life, you know, with a very big extended family.
And live my eternity.
So I knew the Mormon touches, but I thought they all had to do with celibacy and all of that. But that actually, the whole like the vegetarian vampires being Mormons.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And you see like the Cullens, they don't talk to any of the other kids at school. They only hang out with each other.
Right.
Which is very much, I mean, that a lot of religions do that, but Mormons,
Yes.
You can see them. They have the Mormon table at school.
Right. Well, and they always talk about it as though it's like it's self-preservation to get close to any of these people or to accidentally make relationships with somebody that you might have to eventually explain why you disappear after 4 years or whatever it is. But like getting close to anyone it won't work because then you'd have to tell your secret. Mm-hmm. Or really hurt that person. Mm-hmm. Excuse me, hot train. I can't take this. Who's the person in the middle?
That's Stephenie Meyer.
Get out of here. Looking good, Steph.
My attitude
She's pretty.
Yeah.
The previous screen.
That doesn't look like her. She's at the bar.
Appearance in the first movie, sitting at the bar of
Typing.
the diner. She's writing her next hit novel, The Host, probably. My attitude toward Stephenie Meyer without really knowing anything all about her is like, oh, she's some conservative crank. But I've read a lot of interviews with her recently and listened to some, and I gotta say, I kind of like her.
Okay.
So this is, sorry guys, there's going to be me reading a bunch of quotes.
Let me just say though, she loves a person with an angular long face. Look at this group. They're like Easter Island over here. Those are some long faces. They're hot.
Bones could all cut through stone.
Look at that.
I've never seen Stephenie Meyer look more hot than she does in this picture.
Yeah, I know.
Yes.
Gorgeous. Yeah.
The hotness is rubbing off on her. No, she's a good-looking woman.
There we go.
Okay.
Fine-looking woman. Real peace.
Matt, what happened there?
So
He hit puberty.
Sweating.
This is from a 2013 profile of Stephenie Meyer in The Guardian by Kira Cochrane. So, quote, I ask whether she's anti-abortion. Well, I think it's the fourth book. There's like a subplot about, should we abort this vampire baby that's going to kill you? No. And it's like, well, clearly she's anti-abortion.
My baby.
Okay. So this, journalists ask her, quote, I ask whether she's anti-abortion. And she says, you know what? I never talk about politics because that is one of my pet peeves when people with any measure of celebrity get on their soapbox and say, you should vote this way. First of all, celebrities don't know anything about real life. They live in an ivory tower. I lived in the real world for 30 years, enough to know I'm not in it now. End quote. So honestly, that's one of my favorite things I've ever heard a famous person say, to acknowledge you shouldn't even go to me for my political advice. I don't live in the same reality you live in. I have no idea how people live their lives anymore. I used to be a real person, but now I'm a billionaire. And I just wish more people would be that candid.
Self-aware.
Yeah.
Right.
And also, it's clear she's anti-abortion, but she's not.
What really clever way to skirt
give
that.
up the bag.
Listen, the book speaks for itself, right? So, but that was a good response from her, because I think so many times celebrities and famous people, they're just dying to still be relatable, and it's like, stop, you're not relatable anymore.
Right?
Yes, you can't be.
Like she could have bust out her hometown story in that moment if she went. I used to be friends with a girl that it's like that's very boring and you don't get to have both. So like acknowledge your privilege point and don't engage with this conversation. Check. Great. You're not trying to have both.
Yeah, just saying that makes me think like you're probably more of a real person than most celebrities. Okay, so she grew up in Phoenix, attended college at BYU, the Mormon University, got her BA in English literature, but said she never considered becoming a writer professionally. When she had her first child, she decided she wanted to be a full-time mom. And then there's the famous origin story of Twilight. She tells it all the time. I'm quoting again from the Kira Cochrane Guardian article, quote, almost 10 years ago, as a young mother in Arizona, she had a dream about an average teenage girl and a beautiful male vampire sitting in a meadow, lost in conversation about the difficulties of their relationship. The specific problem was that if they became too close, if they gave in to the girl's intense desires, he'd hurt and potentially kill her. Meyer wanted to remember the story, but was struggling with her small son's relentless needs, so began writing it down for safekeeping. It was the first story she had ever put to paper. A modest woman, a committed Mormon, she loved books, had always conjured up stories, but had previously thought the idea of writing anything herself would be presumptuous. That story became Twilight, the first of 4 books in a saga that has sold more than 100 million copies, blah, blah, et cetera, end quote. So that's had the dream, started writing it down, and then went out to her sister who encouraged her, well, take this seriously, try to actually write it. And that dream she turned into what is chapter 13 of the book. which is the sequence where, Edward it goes into the sun. Look, I
Takes her.
sparkle. And starts explaining everything. And I would say the best scene in the movie, the best sequence in the movie, I think, the most captivating. And then she finished the book, wrote to a bunch of literary agencies. It worked. She got a 3-book deal for $750,000, and it was off to the races. All right, the film rights, but before the book was published, the first book is published in 2003, right?
I'm riveted. I don't know. Okay.
The film rights were sold to Paramount before the book was actually published, and they wrote a draft of the screenplay. And here's a quote from Stephenie Meyer in 2008 describing that draft of the screenplay. So this is a screenplay they work up before the book has come out, before anybody knows what this is going to become.
The first book. Right. Okay. So they're that. I mean, they know right away that it's a parallel project.
Yeah, well, so I mean,
interesting.
Tons of books get optioned for movies and then never go anywhere.
Right.
It's like, we're just gonna.
I just want the option.
Yes, and then somebody will write a script, and the script they wrote was nothing like the book. So this is what Stephenie Meyer said. Quote, with the movie thing, they came to me about 6 months before Twilight came out, and I knew that it could go either way. And actually, statistically, it goes the bad way more often. But what pulled me through was the idea that if I could just see it on the screen with one scene right, preferably the meadow scene, that was what I really wanted, and I felt it was worth the risk. It was touch and go. There was another script. They could have filmed it and not called it Twilight because it had nothing to do with the book, and that's kind of frightening. When Summit came into the picture, they were so open to letting us make the rules for them. Like, okay, Bella cannot be a track star. Bella cannot have a gun or night vision goggles, and no jet skis. Are you okay with that? And they were so cool, end quote. Yes, in the original draft, Bella is a track star. She has night vision goggles. She likes jet skis.
Guys. Wow.
The project.
Hopefully someone burned that with fire.
Yeah. I'd love to see
or
it.
put it in a museum.
Summon Entertainment purchases the project and turnaround. Now Twilight Mania has taken off, so they make the pitch. Hey, we'll do whatever you want. We'll be as faithful as you want. They go ahead. So Summit is a production company that's trying to ramp up into being a full-fledged studio. And on the success of Twilight, they're able to, basically they leverage getting purchased by Lionsgate. Okay. To direct. First they hire screenwriter Melissa Rosenberg. She writes all 5 of the movies, and they hired to direct Catherine Hardwicke, who was 52 years old at the time. She was a very successful production designer in Hollywood. She did production design for Tombstone, Tank Girl, Three Kings, and Vanilla Sky. Wow. And then, so she's just one of the most successful production designers in the industry. And then in 2003, she had her directorial debut, 13. Has anybody here seen 13?
Mm-mm.
Yes, I watched it a long time, probably when I shouldn't have watched it.
Right.
It's kind of a disturbing film.
Yes.
I watched it for the first time 2 nights ago. It is it's an excellent movie. It's really great, but it is very, very punishing to watch. Especially, we have a 14-year-old, but I was like, my 14-year-old's good. It's not going to turn bad like this bad girl. But so the story with that movie is Catherine Hardwicke is in a relationship with a man who has a daughter. The daughter is Nikki Reed. She stays close to this girl even after she breaks up with the dad. But that girl has sort of troubled family life. And at the age of 13, Nikki Reed and Catherine Hardwicke together write a screenplay about her life, which gets turned into the movie. Nikki Reed in the movie plays the bad girl best friend, and Evan Rachel Wood plays the movie version of Nikki Reed. Nikki Reed is also in the Twilight movies as Rosalie. And this movie makes a lot of money, $10 million on a $2 million budget. Holly Hunter gets an Oscar nomination. It's a great movie. And it was so interesting to watch this back to back with Twilight and see how many through lines there are stylistically, thematically, how much they look and feel and sound alike. 13 is shot documentary style with handheld cameras. It's shot digitally. Twilight is on film, but the first Twilight has so much handheld camera. The camera is moving constantly. So it's just so interesting to look at the movie that way. So she followed that up with Lords of Dogtown, story about some skateboarders. It was a box office flop, but it's sort of a cult classic.
Yeah, I remember liking it.
And then she gets hired for Twilight, but then not brought back for the sequel. And she said at the time they had a crazy production schedule. They released 1 Twilight movie a year for 5 straight years, and that would be very, very difficult for anybody. So she said she just couldn't do it right. in just basically a few months. So they get Chris Weitz for the next movie. They get David Slade for Eclipse, and then Bill Condon does both Breaking Dawns.
Are they worried about the aging of the actors, or to do it so fast?
I think it's we gotta get while the getting's good.
Yeah, and they just probably think the audience won't know the difference if it's shit.
YA, I mean, the history of YA is like these things move really fast.
Yeah.
The audience moves on very fast.
I don't know. I feel like this really stuck. I feel like this caused a bunch of YA that was very fast.
The Hunger Games kind of took over Twilight by the end, and then the Hunger Games burned out really quickly too.
I think it lives on forever.
Well, yeah,
I can name those two things.
Mm-hmm.
See?
Yeah. I'm just saying this is how they were thinking about it.
Right.
Harry Potter's kind of an anomaly.
I think that they did the movie so fast because they didn't want the actors to like look
right
older. I think that's why they did the Twilight series so
it had
fast.
to be part of it.
With Harry Potter, there was a huge gap where they stopped filming when the boys were going through puberty and stuff like that. They actually stopped filming just because like their voices and shit were unreliable.
Yeah, they'd still get 2 years between movies for that, and those were like, I think the Twilight movies look worse the farther they go along. This first movie has very little CGI. It's shot in real locations. I think it looks really good. As they go along, there's way more green screen and way more CGI because there has to be because we got a deadline.
Oh, right, plus the wolves.
Well, yeah, that too.
It's interesting that the director, made these grittier movies, and because you could argue that influence is there in Twilight. It's a very atmospheric movie, even though it's all about angst, but it does have like this edgy feel that kind of doesn't really click with what it actually is. But you're like, man, this feels like something edgy is happening. Like you buy into it. There's a lot of
murder. I mean, people are dying, and you're dealing with family dynamics of custody and shit, and I mean, I feel like it is kind of teenage years are fucking garbage. Plus, add murder.
13 is so good at observing what real teenagers are like, but she's also great at observing kind of a working class family and a parent who's not perfect but is trying her best. I see a lot of similarities between Charlie and between Holly Hunter in 13, and I think that she really brought a lot to the table for the whole series, even if she only worked on the first movie. Just briefly about the actors. Kristen Stewart was 17 when they produced this movie. Lacey, she's 5'5".
Thank you.
First big role was in Panic Room, David Fincher's Panic Room. Jodie Foster and David Fincher said they could tell right away this kid's something special. She did a lot of stuff like Zathura, In the Land of Women, and Into the Wild, and then Twilight's the big one in 2008. Robert Pattinson, meanwhile, 21 years old at the time of production.
Fucking, is he a goddamn wiggle?
He's a wiggle,
He looks like he's in the Wiggles. He looks insane.
Matt, that picture, you did him dirty. Come on.
He did it to fuck me.
I searched Robert Pattinson 2001.
And then you picked the ugliest picture with the most heinous haircut.
It looks buck wild.
Born to very wealthy parents in London in 1986. Lacey didn't know he was British. So when I pointed out in the movie when his British accent slips out, she's like, what are you talking about?
Blimey.
Before Twilight, the only roles he had were Vanity Fair
The Wiggles
with Reese Witherspoon, but he got cut out of that movie, and then Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire playing Cedric Diggory. And then he gets in Twilight, and basically both of these actors after the Twilight franchise have done a great job using their star power to get like art house movies made, to work with some of the most interesting directors.
They knew they needed to shift.
Yeah.
You like immediately have to break out of that.
Wanted to run away from that kind of fame, and Robert Pattinson is.
Listen, nobody hates on Twilight like Rob Pattinson.
Oh, really?
I think he had a bad time, not just with the fame, but with being told, "Hey, stop being weird in the movie."
Yeah, like he was really trying to do something, and now you can tell them that he actually was fashioning himself after a young Nicolas Cage. That was, and when you know that, then you can see it while you're watching the first one. And for them to be like, "You're doing a lot of acting. If you could just not, and you're the face, my man. You're the face."
And as the series goes along, like Edward really falls into the background.
Yeah.
In the last movie, like there's a part where they make you think he's dead, and I didn't know that it is at the end of the first movie, the final movie. Spoiler alert: they have a big battle that turns out it's just a vision, and Edward dies, and I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Edward can die. Like that's how little it seems he matters anymore. Anyway, That's the history of Twilight.